work with them, and how can we be able to put our heads together to come up with sustainable solutions to our challenges. We also expect in that meeting the County Executive Committee member in charge of public participation at the county government, the Nairobi County government, that's Suzanne Selantoi. We hope to host her also in that meeting, just to tell us what exactly is the plan in place in terms of engaging the resident associations by the county government. Some of you might know that we met the governor towards the end of last year, and he was very positive on how he wants to work with the resident associations. And there's a specific docket to specifically deal with the engagement of various stakeholders. And we are keen. We already had a meeting with the CEC. We talked about a number of things that we think are of interest to us. And we want to hear more on what exactly is the plan in place on moving forward the conversation on public participation and specifically engagement of resident associations in Nairobi. Now, before I invite Robertson, let me also mention that together with Bwana Kirago Wachira, even before this national law was enacted, we supported 3 counties to develop their own Sustainable Waste Management Act, which was basically in line with what we have at the national level. So we supported Nakuru, Kisumu, and Mombasa to develop the Sustainable Waste Management Act, which is what they're using now. I'm told the one for Nakuru and Mombasa has been enacted, is now a law. The one for Kisumu, not yet, but is in the county assembly. So because waste is a devolved function, and we want to see this conversation taking strong root at the county level, and very deliberate measures being taken to ensure that we address our waste challenges in a very sustainable and effective way. And so we are happy that the work we did in those counties is already aligned to the national legislation. Maybe we need to look at, if there's a place that's not properly aligned, we can still see what to do in terms of adjustment. But this conversation is already finding root at the county level. So having said that, ladies and gentlemen, let me invite Robertson Kabusho just to make some remarks. Like you said, it's from Hansdale Foundation, who are our partners in putting this forum together. So Bwana Kabucho, karibu.
Thank you very much, Henry. I am Robertson Kafusho, and I'm here representing our resident representative, Mr. Daniel Zebaling, who was not able to come here today. We are proud to have this first forum for 2023. It is a beautiful journey that we have been working with the Kenya Alliance of Residents Associations for many years now. So I'd like to commend KARA's leadership and also KARA members for the great work that you are doing. And even for this morning, acknowledge the stakeholders who also are part of this subject today, who came out of the interest of the subject. Also to acknowledge the subject matter experts who will be resourceful for this morning's session to help us in how the topic goes, understanding the Sustainable Waste Management Act and its implication on environmental management in Kenya. I work for the Hansdale Foundation as the head of programs, and Hansdale Foundation is a German political foundation which works to promote democracy, peace, and development. We mainly work with local partners in every country that we are present, and our office in Nairobi covers work in Kenya and in Ethiopia. And so we are delighted to work with partners like KARA. We work with both state and non-state actors who we support as long as their work aligns with our mission. So I would like to commend KARA's work, especially in creating these opportune platforms for citizens to engage with stakeholders in government, in private sector, academia, on issues relevant to them, such as what we are discussing today. And for all those years, that is what our cooperation with KARA has involved. We have seen many topics addressed in the different forums, and always because we carry out some form of follow-up and evaluation, noting that many steps have been taken out of forums like this, and especially where key decision makers and policy makers are involved. And hopefully today, being the first forum for 2023, provides such an opportunity for the different stakeholders who are present today, and especially from the policy makers. And it will be a missed opportunity, for example, if we don't have a representative from the ministry, because what we see here and what is increasingly happening is that citizens are the users. They are the ones who have the different lived experiences. An evolving thing is that government alone ceases to have monopoly over many decisions that affect citizens. And therefore, platforms like this that enable discussion and engagement become very important, which governments, both at national level and county level, can take advantage to tap into the collective intelligence that people like you have as, for example, on this matter, as generators of the waste, as collectors and disposers of the waste, and so on, and taking that feedback, taking that input to better and to help them make policies that are user-friendly to the citizens that they are making those for. And so this being a constitutional provision that you and me and many other Kenyans out there have the right to a clean and healthy environment, the presence of this act comes in to facilitate the achievement of that. As we are walking in the streets, as we are walking in our estates, and both in urban and rural places, that we will be able to experience that clean and healthy environment. And I recognize CARA's role that they have played, as I have had, in terms of the input that they have had in this act, and possibly even in the implementation thereof. As Henry has mentioned, support for a county like Mombasa. It is yesterday that I was reading in one of the newspapers that they are actually implementing that. And the article read that the waste collectors have the right not to pick waste from households that is not sorted out, which now puts households at a position where before they take their waste to where it's collected, they have to sort it into the different categories, because now the bill for that county requires of waste collectors not to collect waste that is not sorted, because when they go to dispose it off, they will have to dispose it again in the different categories. So already you see there is some progress in that aspect. So I look forward to the discussion that will be taking place, and we are happy as Hans Sedel Foundation to continue working together with CARA this year. Be on the lookout for the different forums and activities that will be taking place, and we look forward to your participation thereof, so that together we can continue engaging with the different actors and on the different topics, so that the policies, the public goods and services that now come out will keep reflecting the will of us as citizens and as users. And now public institutions such as the ministry, such as NEMA, such as the county government in this case, will also be able to earn the trust and confidence of the citizens that they purport to serve. So we are delighted to have key resource people who will help us navigate this topic, to know what's up, what's the latest, and how the implementation will look like, and opportunities for involvement, and also later on for you to be able to share your insights and ask your questions and have some discussions. And I therefore wish you all a very pleasant morning and forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Regard. I think, ladies and gentlemen, we now want to go into the details of our conversation today about the law that we have in place. I know that a number of our members are already doing a number of activities when it comes to waste management. We see cleanup exercises, we see separation of waste taking place in some neighborhoods. But now this is now expected by law, and it's part of what this new law is coming with. So we expect and we look forward to working with the government to ensure that this is a national exercise, not just located in a few neighborhoods. And it starts by creating awareness and making people understand why we need to do this, the laws in place to provide for that, and how we can be able to do it effectively. So all of us seated here from across the city, from across various neighborhoods, we need to start looking at waste differently and making sure that we are managing it in a sustainable way. So without taking much time, let me now invite Mr. Kirago Wachira, who is a policy, legislative, and international development consultant. And like I mentioned, we've worked with him on a number of legislation and policies, including waste management. And he's now going to just give us some insight on what exactly this law is about and where we can be able to come in as resident association in terms of its implementation. So, Bwana Wachira, karibu.
Thank you so much, Henry and Chairman and my colleagues. Good morning, everyone. Good for intergovernmental collaboration, bringing the county government and national government together And as you're aware, the Constitution is very clear about the coordination, collaboration between the national and the county governments. But it also assigns the functions. What is it that is the responsibility of the counties? What is it that is the responsibility of the national government? And I'll be highlighting that. It also sets up broad guidelines on how the waste is to be managed. So few aspects about the process, from the sorting and segregation at source, from collection to transportation and to the final processing. But it also creates a mechanism for the private sector and citizens to participate. Sometimes the challenge we have, you may find that laws may create a framework only for enforcement and obligations without creating a mechanism for the non-state actor participation in that process. Just briefly again, what are the few objectives of the Act? One is to promote sustainable waste management, and I underline the word sustainable, meaning that waste should not just be seen as in a negative way, but we need to look at it from a positive perspective, promoting environmental health. As you're aware, public health and environmental health, they have a linkage. We dispose our waste, we don't take care of it, it gets contaminated, contaminates our soil, our water, then waterborne diseases, airborne diseases emerge. So the Act seeks to make sure that there's a connection between the public health and environmental health. And then it also promotes circular economy and green economy, meaning that as we dispose the waste and as we produce the waste, we are able to integrate between the counties. Then there are dilemma, and of course, suffices that one is setting the standards and issuing guidelines for the standards to be followed by the counties and the private sector, law enforcement and monitoring the emission of the act, licensing to the extent that those licensing requirements will not contradict or conflict with the counties, then research and information management, carrying out research and of course distribution information, and setting up and facilitating counties to set up a national waste management information center. What do our counties do? One is service delivery. The subsidiarity principle requires that functions are assigned to the lowest unit of government. And so counties are the lowest unit for the implementation of services around waste management. Two is infrastructure development for waste value chain. So at the county level is where we have the conversations around reuse of the waste, collection of waste, segregation of the waste, and just management of that waste. Then establishment of the materials recovery facility by the counties. Of course, that's part of it, and I'm sure that's the conversation we need to be having, that the Act creates obligates the counties to establish materials recovery facilities. The only challenge with that provision is that then it envisages that it's only the counties that will establish those facilities. But actually, this is where the private sector will need to be incentivized to create that mechanism. Of course, the other one is data management and information management. One of the challenges that we face is that it's hard sometimes to tell how much of waste, although the counties provide the incentives for the collection and separation of waste, you have to think to some of the incentives will require national government and therefore the counties to pay some of that incentives. But then you need to help and facilitate people to have a motivation to segregate waste at source. And then, of course, we're creating and establishing waste management plans, including the other layers. And the last one is monitoring. So what I like with the Act is create a mechanism from the national level to the county level of coordinating and streamlining and structuring how waste is managed. So that then we have this structure and the plan in a way that we don't do things haphazardly. How does it imply for the environmental management practice? How does it affect how we practice, how we manage our waste? One, the Act envisages the closure of open dump sites, which is something that the government has talked about. We've had conversations about, and of course, like Mombasa County has closed one of the dump sites. So open dump sites obviously know that it's a thing of the past. It's not a thing of the current and the future. So it envisages that dump sites will be closed. But then you don't just close without creating a mechanism of where then we go from there. It creates a mechanism for investment in waste recycling. So for a mechanism for creating that investments and incentives is very critical. Of course, the other one is health, safety, and environmental standards, and the Act provides a mechanism from the creation of the landfills, the recycling, the collection, and all that. And then the last one is translated into the realities and tools and frameworks that can attract investment. Then obligation to establish waste management plan for every producer of the waste. Then adoption of cleaner production processes, and I think this is very critical for both manufacturers and industry players. Then separation and disposal of hazardous waste, of course, based on the MCA obligations. And of course, the final one is a fine, which is something I find a bit I would say, interesting, but also one of the challenges and one of the expectations that for the private sector, the fine is 5% of net income or 5 million, whichever is higher. Of course, that shows the seriousness that the government and the law requires us to comply, but of course, an area that requires for conversations around the setting up of the fines. For the citizens, one is the waste segregation. I think this is an implication that we all have to appreciate, and it helps us to think through how do we start segregating the waste. And the good thing is that it's an entire value chain. And as you have heard what we did in Mombasa, to provide for the waste segregation at source, but we also empowered the waste transporters and collectors. That if you find waste that is not segregated, you can refuse to collect that waste. Then of course, dispose of waste to authorized persons only, so that citizens are required to only dispose the waste to only the authorized. But of course, the Act also creates a framework for public participation in a way that we can jointly facilitate sustainable waste management. For the waste service providers, the waste handlers, waste collectors, waste transporters, they are required to handle waste in compliance with the Act, deliver waste collected to licensed facilities, and of course, if you don't do that, the fine is 50,000. And facilities, for example, where we had open dump sites, the obligation to restore the sites, access to information based on the Access to Information Act, incentives for investment in the industry. And like I've said, these are conversations that the counties, the national government, the national treasury would have to have a sit-in to think through what tools, what instruments, what fiscal instruments, what economic instruments and tools can we use to actually incentivize the industry in a way that is more practical. Then county fees collected will be reinvested in the county facilities where that is collected. Then creation of a complaints mechanism, and I think Chairman and Henry talked about a meeting where on Friday, there will be a meeting where conversations around complaint mechanism. So the Act creates a mechanism where one can complain. And of course, compliance partnership programs where NEMA, the county governments will have, of course, have a conversation. And as you're aware, for policy implementation to be effective, you require conversation with the government, not just coming with a whip, but a conversation where we partner. And then lastly, how do we support the implementation of the Act? As stakeholders, one is compliance, is to proactively comply with this Act, but two is to participate in this kind of forums, participate in meetings, but of course it's two ways. We are the citizens, but also the government also creates a mechanism where participation is also constructive. Then segregating waste and mobilizing others to segregate the waste within our neighborhoods. Then monitoring the implementation of this Act, meaning creating a feedback mechanism to the government in a way that we are able to show that whatever we put here is not working. And of course, lastly, investment. This helps us to see that there are opportunities where we can actually invest in these particular mechanisms. So thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks, Henry, for that.
Thank you. What the law is all about. I know there are many questions that is going to come through. You've talked about responsible waste management. What does that mean exactly? The waste collectors, are there some standards or expectations that is required of them? So I know we'll go into those details as we go along. And of course, normally it's a practice that we must have regulations for a law to make it easy to implement. So there's a process of developing the regulation that is going on. Last week we had a meeting with the PS for Environment, and he told us that they're in the process of developing regulations for this particular act, which will now break down the various provisions into implementable provisions. And of course, we are very keen as CARA to make sure that we are part of that development of the regulations, because it is in those regulations that we'll be able now to spell out exactly what we expect and what we understand the law to mean, and make it easier for us to even comply. So I know the questions are going to come, and we'll wait for them during the plenary so that we can be able to engage. So having heard from Bwana Wachira, so we also have in our midst Mr. Francis Chwanya, who is the head of waste management at the National Environment Management Authority. That's the regulator. So Chwanya will just share with us from the perspective of NEMA what they understand the law to mean and what mechanism they are putting in place to ensure that the objectives of that particular law is actually achieved. And most importantly, how they intend or how they plan to engage us or involve us as stakeholders on waste management. So, Bwana Chwanya, karibu, and please speak to us.
Is it long enough? Oh, I've started from the end. Good morning, stakeholders. Why is this too far? I'm glad that Bwana Kiragu has done half of what I was to say here today. Yeah, my name is Chwanya Francis from NEMA. I head waste management section, the section that deals with licensing. So there's another section that deals with enforcement. There's another fully fledged department that handles awareness and public education. There's also a research department, and there's also a legal department that deals with formulation of laws and regulations. So I was in a workshop one day, and a stakeholder from the county government said the act has not been gazetted, it's still a bill, and they have appealed against its gazettement. And so this is just for the avoidance of doubt. It was gazetted on 12th July 2022, so it is active. As Bwana Kiragu said, the keywords in the act is all about sustainable development, sustainable waste management, sorry. So we are talking about prioritization of the waste management hierarchy, circular economy, cleaner production, and of course, achieving sustainable development through management of waste. The functions of NEMA, according to the Act, are very clear. If you look at Section 8, we are supposed to develop regulations, standards, and guidelines on sustainable waste management. We are supposed to generate and disseminate information. We are not supposed to keep it to ourselves. We will disseminate it to the public so that they are aware. And we are supposed to enforce legislation for those who are fond of breaking laws. And there's an enforcement chain. First you're warned, you're cautioned, then you're given a written warning. If you're tough-headed, of course, the rest you know. We are supposed to issue licenses. And you can see I've put a star there because the Act says except where county governments have jurisdiction, but that jurisdiction is not clear-cut. So please note that. We are supposed to establish a national color coding system for waste, as Bwana Kiragu has stated. So we have that role. And we're supposed to conduct research, create awareness, and train the stakeholders in sustainable waste management. Then, of course, the waste information system. This is a key one. Every time there is an investor with intentions to engage in the waste management field, they come and say, so how much waste do you generate? And what are the various, the waste characterization? And we say, we don't have that. We only refer them to papers that have been done by actors like JICA, UNEP, and the rest. So this one now is a requirement in the Act that we have to have that information. And the Act also says that we will get that information from who? From the county governments. Yes, because they are the waste handlers constitutionally, of course, except for hazardous waste. That has to be also known, that this act is about non-hazardous waste, all right? Hazardous waste shall be handled as per the provisions of MCA 1999 and the waste management regulations. So, having had this gazetted, what have we done? We had a workshop first, of course, to basically unbundle the provisions of the Act and what it would take to effectively implement it. And of course, the timelines, because the Act also has timelines within which certain activities must be done. So what was this unbundling about? What did we unbundle? Our strategy, the draft strategy, underlines the roles that NEMA has to do as per the Act. Of course, we have also realized that we are not alone. There are several actors, as you've seen from Mr. Kiragu's presentation. So we also have to see interfaces and synergies. We looked at the regulations that the Act requires, both from the CS level, the NEMA level, and the county government levels. And we also saw a lot of overlaps, which could be healthy or unhealthy, but that's a conversation to be held. Resource requirements, human, financial, technological, and so on and so forth. And the next one is areas for consensus development, like what is hazardous waste and what is non-hazardous waste, which regulations are for which area. Requirements for stakeholder engagement. This in the Act has even been defined further in a schedule. The second schedule, it puts it in black and white that if stakeholders have to be engaged, this is how you will do it. So they are not letting, they're not giving room for mischief. It is in black and white. Yes, we are supposed to develop a sample national waste color coding system. In fact, we have drafted this, just awaiting now the second phase of stakeholder engagement and validation. The Act requires that a model county sustainable waste management legislation be developed. And this one has commenced. The Ministry of Environment has drafted this, and last week there was a stakeholder, the first stakeholder engagement for comments on the same. I would advise that you do not sleep. Please look at it and put your contributions there. Because a number of times I find people asking me, why are these fees in the law? And yet when the law was being done, there was room for stakeholder engagement, which they skipped. Yes, what opportunities exist for all of us in this new Act? A number of opportunities. National tree cover and so on and so forth. But now we are going to have targets on recovery and recycling. For me, that is great. We have never had any meaningful public waste management infrastructure. But this time around, this council is going to ensure that the development of such infrastructure is synchronized and certain counties are not left behind. Every time we have a conversation with the county governments on managing of waste, they have always said the money allocated, the budget allocated for waste management is probably the lowest. So this council will mobilize resources for financing the waste management sector. Inter-county partnerships, I was engaging a waste handler who said, if I have to move waste from this county to this county, and which takes me 5 minutes to cross, I am supposed to pay pay something to the other county government. So this council will deal with that. The other one that I really like is the last one there on incentives. Incentives have been written in so many laws, even in MCA 1999, the incentives for green technology, but realization has not been there. Now, with the formation of this council, we see real opportunity for these incentives to be realized. What other opportunities exist? It is now mandatory in the Act to segregate waste as per the color coding system that will be developed. So we will be moving from the situation up there to something much more civilized, and there's another word I wanted to use, but imepotea. So we will be able to handle waste in a very civilized manner, and you know this is how to enhance material recovery and recycling. And if you see the kind of wastes even listed in this particular act, you will still see waste streams like e-waste. Is e-waste hazardous or non-hazardous? So that conversation on the definition of the scope of this needs to be discussed. I see a very strong opportunity, or we see as NEMA, to upscale recycling and to create employment in the recycling or the waste management sector. The establishment of material recovery facilities is now mandatory. Each county government must have, but it is not a preserve of the county governments. Even individual investors can venture. And there is a clause that requires that we can have waste collection, material recovery, and recycling SACCOs. This is big for me because we've had a conversation about informal waste handlers. This is an opportunity for them to be formalized. And the good thing is that there will be either regulation or guidelines to ensure that is done according to the provisions of the Act. So there will be no vacuum to play around. What are the other opportunities? When I was growing up and I could go to urban centers and towns, I used to see everywhere there was that green waste. Is it a skip? Or yes, they were there everywhere. Even around City Stadium, there used to be several big ones. But they vanished, and we ended up with a situation like the other one you see on the left. Now, the Act is saying it is time to do away with those dumps and to reintroduce waste receptacles, waste collection bins, waste collection bags at all levels. And it says the county governments are responsible for that. The question is whether they will do it or they'll pass it on to. Yes, so Kara, please reanalyze that clause and make sure that kila mtu afanye kazi yake, so that that burden is not offloaded to the residents. And if it has to be, then there has to be an agreed formula. I see another very huge opportunity for residential associations. There is a provision for making waste management plans by public and private entities. So residential associations can mimic that requirement and organize themselves and make their own waste management plans. You are free to acquire your own waste transportation vehicles, establish your own MRFs, and you can start trading in recyclable materials, which you can even import, and I'll be happy to give you an export permit. But you can also have a conversation on the cost of the export permit when we review the waste management regulations of 2006, because it is also a requirement here that it be reviewed to conform to these requirements, because it will be shedding some of its functions or some of its provisions. Then the last one there is self-regulation. Organized residential associations are the best when it comes to enforcing their own waste management rules. One, like on segregation of waste. So why would a transporter come and refuse to collect waste because it is poorly segregated? If it is not collected, where does it end? It will remain there. And do you want to see that trash near you? So if you organize yourselves well, you can enforce waste management rules right at the community level. and that way you'll also help us focus elsewhere on our enforcement duties. The requirement for extended producer responsibility, of course, this is anchored on the polluter pay principle, where you'll be responsible as a producer of waste, not a generator, a producer. So look at the definition of a producer of waste as opposed to a generator. Yes? So the producer, the one who introduces that waste, that product, must be responsible for the post-consumer waste that is generated. And I see a lot of opportunities here. We may have a lot of technologies being brought in to help us handle some of the wastes under the EPR schemes. It will also be an opportunity probably to reduce the amount of toxic materials that come in certain products, because you are responsible for its after-use management. So if you can't do that, then you don't bring it. So this is a key one. It will also see a lot of increased waste exports, because the absence of those facilities that can treat means that under the Basel Convention, we can have them leave the country for safe management elsewhere. Yes. The last but not least is that this act gives a lot of opportunities for stakeholders in the waste management sector, including residential associations and civil organizations to participate in the development of these regulations. Remember, most of the regulations to be formulated require the participation of NEMA, the CS, the county governments, as well as the stakeholders in waste management. So this is your chance not to ask questions later why some provisions are there in those regulations. So here, pay attention to procedures for waste management, licenses and permits required. I know this has been a legal issue. People have gone to court saying NEMA is charging the 5,000 shillings per year for transportation of waste. But the county governments are also charging, I understand, 20,000 per truck as a permit. So that conversation on licenses and permits, you must wake up and relook at it. And of course, the applicable fees. Now I have other closing remarks. And the first one has been recurrent. There is very serious need to define what constitutes hazardous waste, so that we leave the non-hazardous to be managed by this act and the hazardous to be managed under MCA 1999 and the waste management regulations. We also need to define licensing under the act and to designate between NEMA and the county governments who is supposed to do the licensing, what is that jurisdiction of the county governments that the act refers to. And while we're having that conversation, we will be considering that one of the actors is constitutionally supposed to be a service provider. So a service provider that also licenses may be a problem. But you know that licenses is about revenue generation. So it is not all about revenue generation. It's all about you, your health, and my health with regards to pollution as a result of waste management. Now, it is required in this act that we have MRFs, we have sanitary landfills, we have waste containers, and so on and so forth. Where does that responsibility rest? According to this act, it is the responsibility of the county governments. So this is still largely hanging on goodwill and the drive by the county governments to do that. If they lack it for whatever reason, and then this dies, or this scenario remains, and we really don't want that to happen. So we have to strategize on how to make the county governments have that drive and goodwill to provide these provisions that the Act has given. And like I've said, it is a very good opportunity for recognition and formalization of informal waste handlers. There was a conversation before on why we don't license people who move waste using hand carts. Yes. And I asked the person who was asking me how many we have arrested in the past for doing that. So meaning we recognize them, we are charging them nothing, but they are helping. But somebody still wanted them to be licensed. Yes, I want to end it there and hope that everything will be dealt with like what you are seeing in there. How many understand what is in that photo? For 1,000 bob. So it was this money you were looking for. Yes?
So this is recycled waste awaiting dispatch for other yes.
No? No? Sorry? 5,000? Yes, 5,000. 5,000. Yes. This is, you guys know of asbestos. And they drive to remove them from roofs and have them safely disposed. So this is an asbestos landfill. So you remove the sheets, you wrap them in those high density polythene sheets, and then you have your lined landfill, the pits. There are some down, and so that is a compartment just about to be now made into a full grave. So these are asbestos graves. At the end of the day, they are covered and it is all sealed. You can't use the land again. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Asante sana Bwana Chwanya for that presentation. I think you put it in a very clear way. Yeah, in terms of the role of NEMA, and I can see you have a lot of work to do to actualize this legislation. And it's you're already doing some of the work, like putting in place the national color coding system, which is in a draft form. So from our end, we just want to let you know that in each of these steps, we would want to have an input, and we are going to engage you to make sure that we are contributing to some of these processes. I don't want to repeat what you've said, because you've said a lot of many things. You've shown how resident association can be able to really come in and the opportunities that are there. And so let me just go straight to the participants and give you an opportunity to ask questions. Is Mr. Kimani in the room from the Ministry of Environment? Mr. Kimani? We're expecting somebody call Mr. Kimani from the ministry. It seems he's not here yet. Okay, so I think we'll proceed because we've had a fair understanding of what the legislation, the law is all about. And like I said, this is an interactive session, so you can ask your question, you can make your contribution, you can share with us your perspective, but of course within a minute or so, because we want as many as possible to be able to contribute. So do we have a microphone? Okay, so let's start with this side, take a few questions on this side, and then we come that side, and of course we give it back to our speakers. So can I see this side, people want to ask questions? 3, I can see 3. Let's start from there, then him, and then him, 3 people. Your question, who is being directed to, and then we'll respond. Proceed, and start with your name and your association, if you're coming from an association.
Okay, my name is Shafiq. Good morning to all of you. And I represent an estate which is about 80 flats. It's called Sohail City. I discovered through Business Daily that there is something like Sustainable Waste Management Act, and therefore acted upon that and decided to get in touch with a company called Junkie Beans. But again, now my issue over here is that I think even though the acts and even the Kenyan Constitution is supposed to be one of the best in the world, we have challenges in terms of implementation. Implementation comes in the context of change of mindset, because every time there is something new that comes, there's normally associated with resistance. What I've realized that sometimes, like we have our education system where we don't train from the beginning, we have English which is mandatory but not agriculture. So you have a very highly fluent speaking farmer with no knowledge of how to plant. And this is where our challenge comes. We don't teach all these things in terms of waste management. So if you don't throw something down in the first place, there's nobody need to come and collect it. This is where our challenge comes, that we don't take responsibility for what we are dumping. You can go on James Gishuru Road, a big Land Cruiser, dumping Java cups, all kinds of things on the roadside, and couldn't care less. When we talk about sustainable waste, I would also try to think that when we are talking about renewable in terms of sustainable waste, where the waste from the gardens is converted into manure, it's being used for that purposes. The same way we should also be thinking about renewable in terms of energy, which I think something must be captured between in that area as to why we are not emphasizing on this. Some of the things that you see in terms of licenses that are coming, and which was mentioned here, have become so expensive, and the technicians that are required to do all this stuff are so expensive that it defeats the very purpose of bringing a very nice act. And then you find we are lost in the politics of not being able to implement, because in Kenya everything normally is politics. And we should be looking at the national good in terms of what are we really achieving, rather than politicizing and getting involved in a whole bunch of corruption and all those kind of things. The last thing that I would like to do is in terms of when we are talking about, and this could go to Kara as well, when you talk about residential disposal of the waste, things like incinerators, is it possible that residential could be engaging in things like disposing of these, because I've seen a place in Parklands where they have this incinerator and they're able to burn off these waste which is not required to be transported, and maybe reduce in terms of what the county government or the rest have to kind of do, so that we not only separate at the source, but we're able to somehow also dispose of this waste in a sensible way, in an environmental friendly way, without having to go much further than that. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Samuel Mohoro, Buruburu Resident Welfare Association. Mine is very brief, in form of a question or so from Neema. It's to do with the ferrying of the garbage. In our area, we have got a lot of problem with the air pollution from the transporters. If you are driving behind those people who are carrying that garbage, you really feel the bad smell. I don't know whether the Act can implement something so that these transporters can have specialized sealed vans or containers whereby the air pollution is not emanated from those trucks. The other one I would like to say is on last picture that you showed on asbestos. Some buildings in the Eastlands, and especially churches, were roofed with asbestos. There are also estates like Jerusalem, Jericho, who are our neighbors. Their roofs are asbestos-based. And we understand from science that water collected from those roofs do affect people who are not even living in those quarters. We would like to know whether in my area, with this one church where I go to, and we are thinking of removing the asbestos, I would want some more information on how best, if we can locally get rid of that roof and bury, a way of burying that material.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, you have the mic.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ezekiel Ware. I'm from a company called Nairobi Urban Renewal Limited. Basically, what we've been doing is we have been installing litter bins in the city and working in partnership with the Nairobi County Government. My question basically is to NEMA with regard to the new legislation that are coming on the Sustainable Solid Waste Act. Because currently the Nairobi County Government also has the Solid Waste Management Act 2015. And in that act, they also have the color coding, which they've already mentioned what the color code is. So when NEMA is going to decide, or at the national level, we need to standardize the color coding, because you don't want to have every county having a separate color coding, because that will bring a lot of confusion and you're confusing the public. So I'd like him probably to answer that later, how he's going to manage that. The other question is, in terms of policy, we are supposed to be introducing what we call the substations, where we're supposed to be transferring the solid waste. And I think in Nairobi it's supposed to be in the 17 sub-counties. Now, if the problem that we are facing is if we don't implement those transfer stations, then where do you expect the citizens to take their waste? And especially now that we're going to go with the sorting of waste at source. For that to be implemented, you must also implement the transfer stations, because that would bring a lot of confusion moving forward. And my last question is also, when you're talking of a color coding system, you must also look at the collection. How is this waste going to be collected? Because you can't separate and then mix it together. So are the vehicles also going to be color coded that are going to do the collection? Or are they going to remain with the same theme, where you mix everything, and once we've sorted it at the source, then you mix it together? So these are some of the questions when you talk of policy. How are we going to move forward on that? Thank you very much. Asante sana.
Thank you very much. I think we had 3 questions from you. The hands are increasing. Okay, 1 minute please, and 1 minute more, so that we can take the other
Hello.
question.
I'm sorry I came late, but I have just fixed some few questions in regards to NEMA, because there are some issues I would like to address to them so that they can take an action. Especially, there is a lack of communication to the complainants towards issues that affect the environment. And
you didn't introduce yourself, by the way.
My name is Charles Tabokumu. I'm chairman of Landimaro Residents Association. I'm sorry I came late, but let me just faster put my question to the moderator concerned. And then the communication aspect. Residents are communicating. Residents are trying to raise issues, but you don't enforce, or you don't make action on them. Sometimes, I want to tell you, you are even advised the polluters to go to court so that to bring a barrier of the action to be taken. Secondly, creation of awareness and a link with the residents. We have never heard that NEMA has come down to the community itself. Only on the World Environmental Day is when we see you on the ground. Apart from that, nowhere. Apart from that, CARA meetings is where we meet NEMA officials. And then secondly, most of these pollutions, NEMA is the beneficiary. Officials, your officials are very crafty, most of them. And as much as the community is trying to have a clean environment, you turn that aspect to more of your income now, and you advise how to give a defense. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, make it brief, Banamwai.
Very. My name is Mwai, member of CARA. Mr. Chwanya, is it Chwanya? I noticed you board printed goodwill, especially with government, county government. That is only possible in a society with values. That's why you go with goodwill. The society we have, I would rather board print the whip. You have to whip this. You cannot go with goodwill. And you, as in charge of implementation, get the whip, go for the whip. I'm a shocky whip.
Thank you very much. I think we can take all the questions and then they respond at once, right? Do you want to take this first and then take another session? That will be preferred. Okay, then you are coming that side. Let him respond. And I can see most of them are just for Mr. Chwanya. And of course, Bwana Kirau can also weigh in on some of the areas. So, Mr. Chwanya, please come here.
I am dying. Yes, it's getting hotter. Yes, so the first question was on the implementation of the Act and the need for a mindset change. Yes, that is key, even though you also know they say teaching an old dog new tricks can be challenging, but all dogs can learn. That's what I believe. The Act provides for education to be given even in schools. So if you look at Section 34, the education curriculum will need to be revised to include environmental education and particularly on sustainable waste management. So we hope that we will be able to copy the Japanese. My experience there was like children right from kindergarten are taught values, particularly on waste management, and they do it with utmost precision. If that happens in Kenya, I will wake up from my grave one day and clap because I want it to be achieved. You've talked about disposal through incineration. Yes, there are wastes that generally cannot be recycled, and therefore the only option is to have them disposed. Incinerators are there in the country, but they are, let me say, all private. There are plans by the Nairobi County government in collaboration with KenGen to do a waste-to-energy plant in Ruai. Environmental impact assessments were done, feasibility studies, everything. There were just a few environmental concerns they were supposed to address arising from stakeholder engagements, which apparently it is now almost a year they haven't responded. So you see how key stakeholder engagement can be. Because if they are not addressed, of course, then the sustainability of that project may also be compromised. Yes, but we do not advocate for these small burning chambers that don't qualify as incinerators, because by adopting them, you'll only be increasing pollution in your neighborhoods. Yes, because they don't have the air, the emission control technologies, so you'll be breathing in dioxins and furans, and certainly that wouldn't be good. Yes, the gentleman from Buruburu, the Act in Section 33 provides for the design of garbage or waste transportation vehicles. The word garbage is actually not used. The design and identification of waste transportation vehicles, so NEMA will give very clear standards. The standards are even there now in MCA and as well as the waste management regulations. But knowing, you know, they say Simba kikosa nyama. Sometimes I have never seen a Simba eating grass, but that is what they say. But we are where we are because of lack of anything better. Even when they're donated, they only operate for a few months and then they're grounded. But this act now provides for proper designs and identification systems. I have suffered the same thing you're saying. I don't even mind the smell. I mind the spillage. You know, they go around and when we arrest and it's branded NMS, you heard the declaration the other day that government institutions should not be dragging each other to court. Which brings me to the other issue of the whip. You can only whip. There's an extent to which you can whip. But of course, enforcement is still an option we have. Asbestos, well, this is outside the scope of this, but I can give you a very quick rundown. Yes, so it starts with you conducting what is called an environmental impact assessment, where we look at the condition of the asbestos material. If the asbestos roofing is in good condition, if it hasn't deteriorated, please leave it as it is. You can only help it by probably applying a coat of paint, because what is dangerous in asbestos is when it is too old and starts to crack, and then the fibers are released, and then that can be dangerous. That is what causes, those respiratory ailments. If it is in good condition, leave it there. But if you just don't want to see it, then do an environmental impact assessment, have a contractor licensed by the NCA, remove it, have them wrapped, and have them disposed by a licensed asbestos transporter who operates a landfill. Or if you intend to do an on-site burial, then you must do what is called a hydrogeological survey. That is so that we know how deep the water table is. Then you line it, you wrap, you seal, and it remains an asbestos grave. Then you can re-roof with new material. Okay? There was a question from Ezekiel on the national color coding system. The Act says that NEMA, in consultation with the county governments, shall develop a national, the keyword there is national, color coding system. So this shall be applicable across the country. And it has to be a document owned by, it has to be a color coding system owned by NEMA and the county governments together. And that will also be in the model county sustainable waste management legislation, which then is required to be adopted by all counties. So all those of 2015 obviously are obsolete. They will have to go by the new model that is being developed now. All right? The requirement for material recovery facilities, this is entrenched in the Act. Their design, their location, their requirements, the numbers shall be determined by the county governments, and they will have to do environmental impact assessments for them. Remember, a material recovery facility sounds very sweet until it is located next to where you live. And remember, you'll be handling organic waste as well. And you've just heard that when they're being brought in there, they smell. So if it is brought near you and they're still smelling, of course, you will be exposed to the impact, and you wouldn't like that. That's why an EIA, environmental impact assessment, has to be conducted for each one of them, and the neighbors have to agree that this is good to set up here. Otherwise, they'll be in locations where they pose the least impacts to the residents. And there's a requirement that they'll only receive sorted waste. Some of them can be in areas where even a composting facility will be there to handle the organic components. So that is how it is. And there will be special regulations according to the Act, specifically on MRFs. So during that time, please also engage so that you give your inputs on what components should be there and their locations and whatever activities will be going on in there. That's so far what there is. Charles, you said there's lack of communication from NEMA, particularly on complaints. Yes, this is a complaint I've that we are passing the buck. Even noise was devolved. Unfortunately, most county governments do lack that enforcement power, and so they do run back to us to go and help them. That's why you see our officers in there. But that is a devolved function. Yes, you said that some of our officers or our officers are crafty. Yes, we have received complaints of crafty officers. A few of them have been relieved of their duties. Others, unfortunately, this is from a HR perspective not a very good thing, but some of them get moved to lesser busy areas where they have very little corruption to practice. Yes, but what matters is if there is a case of corruption, we have other agencies that handle corruption cases. And so if you have evidence that can stand the threshold for prosecution, you can help the authority by doing what? By taking action. Actually, that is the biggest question I always ask myself when I sit somewhere and I hear, oh, some officers went to a facility and they made away with 2 million Kenya shillings in bribes, and ask myself, Kenyans are that rich when they're saying the economy is bad. Why don't you treat the money? And I mean, some of these things we condone them, and then we cry. Corrupt. Everybody has some propensity for corruption. You know, we are all temptable, especially when the price is good. The way to end it is provided for in the law. Yes, I agree with you. Others also, these are things I've had. Others, once an offender, you can report an incident, the offender gets arrested, yes, but it is the same officers who know where the law is weaker and how to let that offender off the hook. I told you we have a legal department. So they would still give the other side, but at the right price. And the question is, how do you then deal with that thing of the right price? Report corruption cases to the authorities responsible, because some of them have been arrested and they have won cases and they're back. And they're telling us, you see, you thought by setting me up I would die. I am here back with you and earning more than you are. Yes. You want to say something, but it's not for me to give you the chance. It is the moderators.
We have documents pertaining to the matters. We have writing up correspondence communications from your offices. Thank you. You have said you normally transfer, but I think when you are transferring a criminal state officer, you are promoting criminalization. You are spreading the criminality across the country. So I don't see whereby a common mwananchi, once is found or guilty of an offense, is arrested and taken to court. But when a NEMA officer found guilty of an offense, is being transferred. So such a thing is what I'm trying to raise. And then again, let me tell you, I have documentations pertaining to NEMA. I have all the reports we have done. But the only thing is that the frustration from your office. And I've sent even several mails without response. And we know very well, if you see a state office, you are sending an information and they don't respond, it is a collaborative crime. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to highlight if something can be done. Because you are making policies, but these policies, to enforce them is a problem. And you are barring again at the same time. Thank you.
Very good, I get you. Transfers only happen in cases where the evidence provided does not meet the threshold for a sacking or even for prosecution. It is a risk management scheme. indeed, we hope that wherever they go, there would be somebody bold enough to do what needs to be done. However, what I would advise you is the DG's office is open, that's the Director General's office. After this, please, I'll take your contacts. You can come to the office. I will personally take you to the DG, and the dossier you have on these officers, give it to the DG, and I'm sure something will be done. Yes. There was a question of awareness creation. Like I said, we have a fully fledged awareness department. I normally see them every other day out there saying they're doing awareness. But to an extent, I want to agree with you here. As a compliance officer who does licensing, when I visit a facility for what we call compliance assistance, I realize they are very green on certain things that I thought our education and awareness people would have told them already. So I ask myself, so we had a meeting with the educators, and we were asking them, where is your roadmap for doing awareness, and how come the regulated facilities seem to be very green on most of these issues and provisions? Is it that you are not directing your efforts to the right target groups? And they said they will re-engineer their work plan, and we can give them feedback on which areas they need to focus on. Yes, that is feedback that we've received, and it had been forwarded to the Education, Awareness and Public Participation Department. We are hoping to see some change, but we're also asking them to re-engineer the way they do their outreach programs. Yes, they are very vocal when it is World Wetlands Day, World Environment Day, World Day to combat desertification, and so on and so forth. But those are international events. We need national events. That feedback is going to reach the DG's office, because I'll have to give a brief at the end of this. Mr. Mwai, I got your name right? Thank you. Goodwill. Goodwill is a very noble word, especially when it's a legal provision. Yes? Yes, you need goodwill from a service provider, even though it is also a right, especially if you pay for it. But if you can't get the values you need and you're paying for it, then you look for a plan B. Yes? We are all at liberty in this forum to get a mpango wa kando, including what I was saying that the residential associations can do. However, yes, the extent of what they have been given as a responsibility in the Act, I agree with you, does not require goodwill. But it depends on their goodwill. Because even in the past, they had these responsibilities, but they've not done them. Now I'm hoping that the council, the Waste Management Council, will push them to go beyond goodwill and, of course, do what they are supposed to do through resources, which they've said is always their bottleneck. The WIP, yes, the WIP, we've worked with the WIP before. There was a time sewer lines were bursting all over and people were driving through sewage along Uhuru Highway everywhere. So one day we called someone I won't mention here for a formal meeting without disclosing what we wanted to do. But the meeting room turned out to be a police cell. You know, we have a police unit. So that is where he found himself. And within the next week, a budget suddenly appeared and those manholes were fixed. The society is changing, and I doubt if we can adopt same methodologies, but collaboration will always work. I believe so. Is there any that I haven't answered? Yes.
Thank you very much for the response. Maybe, Bwana Kirago, if you have something to add on, maybe we can do that as after we've taken all the other questions. So we have this side. Can I see by a show of hands who is asking questions? This side. Huku tulisha talk. Really left this side. Now we are in another stage altogether. So how many? Let me just put your hands up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've seen 7 hands. So we are going to take those 7.
Representative. So I was going through the Act, and Part 2, number 6 states that there shall be a council to be known as the Waste Management Council, which shall be established by the Cabinet Secretary within 1 year to the coming into the operation of this Act. And this Act came into operation on 26th of July, 2022. So is there a council? That's number 1. Number 2, the same Part 2, number 6, Part F, it states that 4 other persons appointed by the Cabinet Secretary being, number 1, 1 person being nominated by the registered association representing the largest number of entities in the private sector, which I believe must or might be CARA. So is there a position, is there a possibility that we can get a representative from CARA to sit on this Waste Management Council so that they can look and be part of our voice to advise on the same nature? Santi.
Thank you very much. Was there another question there? Mr. Kanaki, you have a question? Mr. Kanaki, yeah. Please.
Thank you. But, yeah, good morning, everybody. With the NEMA for quite a while, City Council also quite a while, and I know that the meeting today is supposed to help us as residents and of course stakeholders to think about that practice of separating colors as indicated in the law, and we agreed. Mine would be to persuade the group here to listen to the international practice, listen to what we have done for many years, because when I came to Nairobi in 1971, that is very recent compared to when my chairman came, the garbage was always in one bin. City county government is not keen to transform to the practice of those bin or of those other colors we are talking about. Mine is to say, if you can just generate the debate and you accept that we need to separate the garbage for us to be able to help the civilized way of doing it, I would like to say you have won this battle. But if we are in the other thinking of no, we need to continue the way we are, I think we'll have a problem. Remember, Nairobi sets the pace for all the other counties. It determines, it influences. If you do not acknowledge this, we have a very big challenge. So mine is to just put in a pastoral question as a reverend and say this. Genesis 2:15, God told Adam, till the land and take care of it. You are accountable for all the waste, and make sure that the environment is protected and leave it better than you found it. So the best way to go is what others have done. The guy in Washington in charge of solid waste disposal is a Kenyan. It's one of the cleanest cities around. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move quickly.
Asante sana. I am not a CEO, but I'm privileged to share the first name Henry with the CEO of Kara. So my names are Henry Wahinya. I'm the secretary of Jericho Lumumba Residents Association. Very young, 2 years old now. We formed it when we heard that they were coming to demolish our old age estates, Jericho Lumumba being one of them. I am not going to ask very many questions. I had a mouthful of questions, but I am not going to ask. One of the reasons is that time is not with us. Number two, I have these contacts here. I'm going to reach them out to ask them questions. And I'm going to plead with the organizers to share the presentations with us, because we have the emails, so that we understand this elephant much better, known as the 2022 Waste Management Act. So we would appreciate if you can share that with us. The other thing I wanted to ask from my namesake is, I had an issue of household sorting waste. Maybe you can shed more lights on that one so that we understand. It's going to affect wale watu wetu pale nini Jericho Lumumba Estate and in the slum areas. Because what I got it from you is that you brought me here to indoctrinate me about this act so that I can go and raise awareness and train people from Jericho Lumumba Estates. There was a lot of talk about landfill in Murang'a being built by the World Bank. And we even went to Arusha, Tanzania, and we saw great landfills. Does the act have a provision for landfills construction in this country as a way of waste management? And
please summarize so that you can.
Let me now summarize that.
The last question.
There was also an issue from Japan, waste is wealth. How is the act going to address that issue? Where companies are formed, then they export forks, plates, mugs, they generate foreign exchange for Japan as a nation. Asante sana.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for those questions. I'm sure they've been noted. What was next? Yes, Bwana Kithaki.
Thank you, colleagues. I think I will start differently from that people who have spoken. I think Francis and Kiragu
Maybe you could introduce yourself first.
My name is David Kitaki of Kara. I think Francis and Kiragu, you have done a good job. And for Francis, you do not have to defend NEMA because the Act says it. So it's not, we are not fighting you and we are not fighting the other. One of the things I would like to state, and this affects Kiragu also, you have assumed that we all know what is waste. There was no definition of waste. And I felt there, and I think I don't know much, so I felt I would have been helped if we knew what you mean by waste, even before you come to the management. You talked more of the management of what, by who. Then you used words like generator, handlers, and managers. When I am in my household, and I have my waste, my household, somebody used that word, household. How, am I a handler? Am I a generator? Am I a manager? Am I what? Where do I come in? Yes, and I'll make it very brief. I think you are doing very well, both of you in your areas, but one thing which will help this group here, even the people who are not here, is when you have talked about enforcement and you know you are not succeeding, what have you done? Have you looked at alternative means? Have you looked at global experiences? Brasilia is a city that is very neat and clean. You don't have to go very far, go to Kigali. And please note what affects people. And if you have a research department, we can help by sharing ideas from other places. Asante.
Thank you very much. Any other question? Anne, you had your hand up.
Madam.
Yeah, there's a microphone next to you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm the founder member of Jumbi Road Residents Association, and I'd like to make just one or two brief comments. The first one is that I believe, but I'm not sure, there are two types of asbestos. One is white asbestos and the other is blue, and that is far more dangerous. The second comment is that over the Christmas period, I always get very depressed because, unlike the majority of people here, I don't have any relatives near. So I dedicated my time to recycling waste, and that has continued now for months and months because so many people in Jumbi Road and the East African Women's League have donated matumba and other kinds of waste. And I think if everybody could follow up doing that on a small scale, that would tend to help our environment, because so many people are needy and so many people waste good matumba. They also recycle a lot of compost, organic compost, which is recycled in Kikuyu, and plastic waste, who represents a very worthy cause. And there's one gentleman I met recently who's recycled plastic waste. This is a gentleman called Mora, and he takes sacks and sacks of waste products that have been donated, and it is recycled into plastic and shoes and crates, all kinds of goods. But I think if people could do that on a much larger scale, it would benefit the community. And finally, I would like to thank the photographer for taking photographs and for recycling, because I think it would be a very nice thing to see that the people participating and the committee can recycle the photographs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that and for the work you're doing. Any other hand there?
Thank you very much, Kara, for holding this session. My name is Edith Alusa from Ecotourism Kenya. And I have two concerns. One is that NEMA seemed to ask the residents, especially the individual who had an asbestos issue, to deal with the issue himself. Every solution that he was asked to have was so expensive. A hydrological study, a this and that. I think it's really unfair for NEMA to expect residents to deal with something hazardous. I think that should be a national objective, that there needs to be a scheme by NEMA. I know there's devolution, but devolution doesn't mean that they're going to delink from the responsibility, because they do have a national responsibility, Mr. Chwanya. I will be speaking with you separately. But I would like to talk about my members, because at Ecotourism Kenya, my members are not in resident associations. They are lodges and hotels. And some of these lodges and hotels are in remote areas. They do not have groups. They've been dealing with waste management, and I've been auditing them since 2002. And they do not have any incentive. They have to get a waste management license. They have to incur all sorts of costs, because they also have to have their site audited every year and pay an associated licensing fee to be a waste disposer, to be a waste transporter, to be a waste handler, and all those other classifications that Mr. Kebaki was asking for clarification on. And I think it's really unfair. For some of them, I know some of my members are crazy, they need the stick, but a lot of them need incentives. I would like to sit down with NEMA and have incentives that we can develop for people who have no options of how to manage their waste. I know some of the counties cannot also handle that kind of waste because it's so remote, it doesn't make economic sense. But if they had incentives, then they'd be able to, and they've been doing it since 2002. I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Edith. We are done with the questions. Okay. I think I can see two more hands. I'll just give that leeway if it's burning. Please, 1 minute, and then we get back to the speakers. No, we are not going to end if we keep having hands coming up.
Habari ya kila mtu.
Mzuri.
My name is Alice Naliaka. I'm coming from Komaroko Ward Alliance. I'm just wanting to ask a question, because we have been talking about lorries and lorries carrying waste. Those lorries, when they pass, what is the end result? Where do they take those waste? Because wherever those wastes go, I know there are people there. Is it not a health hazard for those people? Okay. Because I've never known the end result. Maybe you can explain to us where they go to. Yes, we produce waste at our household, and then they are taken. Where is the end result? That's what I would like to know.
Asante sana.
Yeah, and then another comment I wanted to make. Because it's very difficult to change a grown-up. So I was wondering, I was asking a comment, maybe NEMA or any other responsible person who can take care. Maybe you can do talks in schools. When you educate these children when they are still very young, they will take it. So that when they grow up as adults, they will have a changed mind. Unlike changing an adult. When you go to do lessons or talks to adults, some of them, they don't change. But it's better you change the people from as young as possible.
Asante sana.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have the last one. You can take 30 seconds. I can see you're really insisting.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Harrison Olo. I come from an association called WEMAC, Waste and Environment Management Association of Kenya. I have a company that is doing recycling called Leonard Enterprises. I'm not standing in for the county government if they're missing here, but as a transporter and a manager of waste, they have reduced their licensing fee from 20,000 shillings to 5,000 shillings. Someone was concerned about that. Second, this issue of bad smell, I wish the county government were here, but only if they increased on their frequency of collection, then I'm very sure on the road we'll not have something that will disturb us. And again, to NEMA, I do not know if this is going to be possible. Is there a way you guys can talk to the recyclers that we give our waste to? The sorted material like the plastics and cartons and the bags, so that we can have a standard rate for purchasing of those that we sort. Because as for my company, I have a recycling center at the dump site. We have the PET bottles, like they were. I'm happy to hear you cannot see. I'm not seeing the PET bottles. You're seeing glasses instead. But can that be controlled so that they can be buying these things at a standard rate? The cartons, the PETs. So because at some point you have so much of this, and when you want to sell it off, they will dictate at what price they're buying it at. So it's so demoralizing sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last one. Yeah, Misha, please, 1 minute.
Good morning to everyone. I'm Edward Oswe, the CEO of Marketing Society of Kenya. I'm sorry I came late to attend the meeting. Actually, I received the invitation yesterday, and when I was asking, like, how does environmental relate to us? There was also another meeting for the media. I said, okay, fine, let me attend and hear. What I've come to learn for the shortest time that I've been here is that, waste management is a national issue that needs to be addressed by everyone, okay? I don't want to take much of the time, but how do we handle it? Okay, and how do we collaborate? How does MSK come on board to help you, or to help the country? Okay, is through what we call probably collaborating with CARA to run, to create a platform that can drive behavior change, because that's what is needed. I was so much, excited when the gentleman there said, "Who is he when it comes to domestic waste management? He does not know where he falls." Remember the campaign for COVID, which MSK championed, the National Business Compact that was convened by MSK. All the adverts that you are seeing about behavior change were done by the Marketing Society of Kenya. And that's how we can come in to work with CARA and to work with stakeholders. And also, how do we bring the corporates on board? Because probably we don't have the finances, NEMA might not have the finances, but we have corporates, because these people who are working within the corporates are also the people who are living within these areas that are affected by the waste, okay? And they're the people who can champion for these corporates to probably donate their ad spaces on TV, on billboards towards, trying to sensitize people on behavior change, on waste management. You used to see, someone would advertise a product, and then at the end of it, there is like 5 seconds about COVID, okay? That is how MSK can help, and we help by having another platform. We bring the stakeholders together who have the finances that can help us champion for this. So thank you so much. I'll be interested in working with you on that. And after this, probably I'll take the contacts, and then we can see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we'll have that conversation after this, so that we can see how we can collaborate. So maybe I'll ask Bwana Kiragu, do you have any reaction to any of the comments before we go to Chwanya? Please, you can just take a few minutes, you can react, and then we can end with Bwana Chwanya.
Thank you so much. Bwana Chwanya has identified, explained most of the areas. Just to add on that, one is that the Act provides for an obligation to the minister as the CS, in collaboration with the CS in charge of education, to develop a curriculum that then will be used for facilitating education for the various categories of learners. The only issue is that you'd hope that the curriculum is not intended just to be an examination type of kind of a learning, but it's a curriculum to facilitate and organize the way of learning for all population groups. But the other one is, just in terms of the summary, even as we have a strong legislation, behavior change is one of the things that we have to meet between the government and the citizens. But coupled with that, for people to be facilitated to change their behavior, of course, in terms of, in addition to learning, the government then would, and that's part of what the Act provides, so we'd hope that, and then at the point of implementation, that the citizens are facilitated to the best of their ability to comply. Remember when we used to file our tax returns and we would queue at KRA offices, then down there, like every month, if you're filing VAT returns, you'd have to go to the bank and pay, walk with a slip, go to KRA, then they stamp it, then you come back. Every 20th you do that, but with the iTax, you do all your things at the comfort of where you live. So part of what we envisage, the kind of a collaboration, is where the government facilitates people to comply. But the other one that is more for food for thought, and it's coming out, is there are many areas that are not served by waste collectors, waste transporters. They are left to the benefits of government. For example, informal settlements, and there are many areas that are not structured, organized, like many of the places where you come from. So they are unlikely to have access to papers that are coded, collection bins and the rest. So it's more of a conversation and the reflection, how can they be facilitated to also do segregation? Because for them, segregation is not even the issue, because they have pits that are actually dug out. So their conversation and how waste is collected there, it's a bit different. But the other one is in terms of intergovernmental collaboration. So when we talk about license fees, it's actually cutting across, not just for waste. In many other sectors, you have areas where the national government is collecting a fee or a user charge, and the counties are collecting. And so, as Francis indicated, it's an area that we as the citizens, and of course the private sector, residents, associations, will then need to engage with the government organizations, both Environmental Ministry, NEMA, but also with the National Treasury and the counties, to have the two government arms sitting together. Because without that, you'll find fees are still levied for the same function or the same service. If you're transporting waste, there's no need of paying the same service, a fee for the same service to the national government and to the county. But then you require a kind of a collaboration within one sitting, so that then the two levels of government appreciate and formally, one either see it or the other one say, by the way, then let's reduce it to make it like to just like what you call a peppercorn. Then the other one is more for facilitation in terms of the private sector to invest. And Francis indicated about the current act has conversations around provisions on incentives. This act provides for incentives for private sector to come and invest. But the issue is the cost of doing business. So the conversation is, what are the specific areas that needs to be unlocked to facilitate reduction of the cost of doing business? Cost also means the cost of regulation, cost of compliance, but also the cost of investment. And of course, the last one is someone asked about the definition of waste, and I think that's very helpful. It's also that we would also have avoided to go into the details of defining the waste, because also you may have asked us whether we are taking it so lightly that we have to come and start low to define the waste. But that was a very good challenge. Just in a summary, what we mean is we are dealing with the solid waste, so that not the liquid waste and the rest. So we are just looking at materials, substances that are intended or destined for disposal. Whether you're going to recycle them or later, but any material solid that you intended to go and waste or dispose it or discard, that is the simplest way of defining the solid waste that we are actually dealing with. But lastly is to say that even before we wait for the act to be actualized, let all of us be the champions of change. We sit with in cars we drive, or in cars that we share with others. How do we manage the waste that we generate ourselves? The small litters, the small garbages, do we roll the windows and throw the waste outside, and then hope that the government will come and do it for us? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the comments that we received and the set of questions. So how many of us understand what waste is? How many do not? you may be shocked that the definition of waste is very complex at the end of the day, because this guy may get tired of it and either put it under the bed or throw it outside by the road. At that point, it becomes waste to him, but not to the next person who encounters it. When some people get tired of computers and ICT equipment from out there, they bring them to us as very nice donations, and we clap and we sing and we dance. But 6 months down the line, they become waste, and we call them e-waste. So waste is a complex term. We had questions from Comarox about the waste transportation vehicles and the manners they cause, particularly the smell. But that has all to do with the collection schedule. The smell is because of overstayed organic waste within our residences. So this act provides for formulation of regulations that will also define a collection schedule, and a schedule that will be agreed upon by the regulators and the stakeholders. We hope that you will not detain your waste for too long to an extent that they'll start smelling. At the end of the day, even if they'll be smelling, they'll be on their own as segregated, in which case they'll be going straight either to a material recovery facility for composting or otherwise, using specialized vehicles that we shall define. That way, probably we would do away with the open trucks that are currently in use. So we hope that that will be a thing of the past. Fees that I had talked about, let us look at that issue of fees when the time comes, when the regulations that introduces those fees will be discussed. There was a second set of questions from another gentleman. You are Kimutai or Kimutai? Yes, Kimutai. The act was gazetted in July last year, so we still have ample time until July. So there's no council yet. The CS hasn't gazetted any. The president hasn't appointed the chair. So yes, that's still work in progress. You're asking whether Kara would get a slot. Which other residential association is bigger than Kara in Kenya? Is there? So consider yourself going in unopposed. Yeah, so that would be a plus for everybody, because I have seen Kara's engagements and there are people with brains, and that's what we need to make progress. Brains and resources. Yes. Another set of questions came from Henry. Where was Henry seated? Oh, there. About household sorting. So the categories of sorting will be guided by the provisions of Section 33 of the Act. So those will be defined. In the regulations, we will define the categories of waste to be sorted. When I was living in Japan some times back, just to mention briefly, I don't want to say, but do I say? We were having up to 13 categories of waste to sort. And the way it was being done was so religiously sweet that when I came back home and I was dropping something in the same bag, I felt like my hands were refusing. Yes, so we will have a definition of those categories. Somebody was talking about waste as a resource. That is what this act is all about. They are saying, let us re-engineer our thinking of waste as trash, but let's consider them as a resource and therefore separate. And once you separate, clean waste fetch more returns. Dirty waste is regarded as trash. There were a set of questions from, actually comments from David. First was the definition of waste. which Bwana Kiragu has talked about. I don't think I have defended NEMA in any way, because at the end of the day, very soon, when my clock ticks, I will also be a private citizen. And my defense right now may turn to bite me, so I don't want to do that. I just put everything in black and white as it is. Yes, global experiences. I have seen some of my colleagues going to countries like Germany to benchmark on how they are doing their EPR. Others have been to Denmark on circular economy and industrial symbiosis. You'll be shocked that their sewage is taken to a wastewater treatment plant and somebody is recovering bacteria and then getting a specific enzyme from that bacteria, which is then used for pharmaceutical production. Yes, the technology is awesome. Some other person who is doing timber manufacturing has waste in form of sludge, which another one uses to make, the company is Gyproc. This is Gyproc, what are they called? Gypsum. It's gotten a lot of materials they recover from wastewater. And that whole area is called, what was the name? But it was all about industrial symbiosis. What you discharge, you give me for free. I use it, what I discharge, I give her, like that. So everything is circular and there's a lot of industrial symbiosis. We tried that in Babadogo using the Danish experience, and we are yet to document our findings. But it's coming soon because it's still alive. It was called the GECO program. I was not directly involved, but of course I knew the concept. We will share the findings very soon. There were comments from the lady from Jumbi Road, Anne. Please keep up the good work. I have seen that happening outside. In other areas, they've set up shops where if I'm tired of this, I go give it there. And people buy them for, at very affordable rates. And that way, the society keeps sharing. And sharing is caring, right? Asbestos is actually a very complex set of minerals. They say there are 6, but if you go to Russia, they'll tell you there are over 9. The ones we have here are the gray type, which were mostly for roofing, but asbestos are used for a number of things, including on our motor vehicle brake pads and so many things. And whereas a part of the world is fighting to get rid of asbestos, there is another part of the world, the producers, that are fighting for continued use because of their beneficial, for the benefits they have, including fireproofing and so on and so forth. The concern here is the old, dilapidated, and fibrous roofing materials. Those ones, we need to do something. And if I want to connect that to what Edith was saying, NEMA as a public institution depends on a budget that is drawn at the beginning of the financial year. And if you were to put anything in there for managing asbestos hands-on, it will not be approved. That's why we've engaged in more of awareness creation and voluntary removal. We've never gone somewhere to, in fact, I have seen orders where our officers go to say, you must remove. But when it reaches the headquarters, we have the county officers, then we moderate and say, it is voluntary for now, so don't push. Yes, there are areas where our officers have pushed, but we shouldn't be doing that. We should be helping you identify areas where you can have them disposed of. Yes, it is good to know where the water table is, because if you do not, then at the end of the day, you are simply removing a mess from here and messing others further. So yeah, those precautions are necessary. Institutions with money like APA spent a lot in removing the ones they had at the port, and those are the successes we can document. We've identified others and are telling them, next time, create a budget so that we remove asbestos from our roofs. Yes, in terms of, one of my slides had this question of deciding, let's say we have put these materials in a recovery facility. So you have sorted bottles, the PET bottles, the glass bottles, and a number of things. And you want to move them there now to the recycler. Do they still carry the same tag of being waste? Or are they at that point resources so that we remove the requirement for licensing when they leave the material recovery facility to a recycling facility? When we are doing the regulations, we must have that conversation. For introduction of a certain recycled fraction in our product. So let us open our eyes to this aspect of incentives when the time comes for doing regulations and guidelines on incentives. That is where everything lies. Where do wastes go when they leave your house? I can see the one who asked the question. Where do your wastes go? They go to disposal facilities provided by the county government, previously the municipal governments. In law, they're supposed to be called landfills, but we don't have landfills in Kenya. We have dump sites. And in the evolution of waste disposal facilities, dump sites are the Zinjanthropus of facilities. So that is where we are in terms of that civilization process. So we will move from those dump sites, that is according to the Act, and go to sanitary landfills with progressive covering. So you wouldn't find open dump sites anymore. The CS will do a roadmap for removal of all those dump sites. Yes, they are a concern for public health and even safety. The Dandora case, it went to court and the court said it be decommissioned within 6 months, which is like saying within 6 months, let us close down Kenyatta National Hospital. It is the balancing of, the juggling of the lever that our former CS talked about. So it is still there, and that's why the waste to energy plant in Ruai was an option to achieve the decommissioning of the Dandora dam site. But let me also tell you that the persons who are currently benefiting there have also gone to court saying you are killing our livelihoods. So it's a double-edged sword. Yes. And we are left between a rock and a very hard place. Then Bwana Harrison, you said you're from Awemak? Wemak. Okay. The issue of, the Act provides for sorting of waste right now. So it guarantees you clean, recyclable material. However, during last week's discussion on the model county legislation, that became a thorny issue because there's that requirement that all waste generated from households in their segregated form go to an MRF provided by who? The county governments. And it is at that point that they'll decide the price for what is sorted there and the outlets where they go to the recyclers. So yes, some recyclers at that point raised a lot of concern that that would be like match fixing. There will be a price fixing, and yet what the Act wants is that market forces should be left alone to play. Yes? That is why even in the UFC wars, you see people are being weighed so that you and I don't meet in the ring because we have weight differences. Yes, so we want the sorting the segregation that is currently provided for to happen, but let fair market practices prevail when it comes to pricing of the sorted materials. And your input in that pricing is key. So, like I said, this is just to wake you up that there's a tsunami coming in the form of the sustainable waste management regulations and several other things, so that you wake up when those regulations come. Because those regulations are the ones that bite. You've not seen any fee on in the act, but they'll come in the regulations. What I'm also saying again is that the act has so many regulations that it wants done. So do we want to have 20 regulations that will confuse you, or can we decide to consolidate so that we have at least 1 to maximum 3 regulations? Thank you.
Asante sana Bwana Chwanya for those reactions to the questions and comments. I think we are coming to the end of this session. Did you find this session useful? Did you learn anything? Anybody? Sorry? Okay, 30 seconds, please. Can say from there. For who?
For my friend Francis.
Okay, please.
My name is Dr. Bernard Karia. I'm Dr. Bernard Karia, and I'm a practitioner of environmental sustainable tools for many years. Now, one thing I wanted to be clear about is I'm aware there are waste management regulations 2006. I would like to know what informed the formulation of this particular act, and the regulations you are talking about that are to be developed. How different will they be from the 2006, or you craft some that will be matched or will borrow from there? The other question is, I know we are not short of policies, regulations, acts, and all that in this country, but of course, compliance is a very big issue. How do we then ensure that we have compliance? We are also used to probably using any gap as an incentive to attract donors. Donors will come and facilitate certain activities which we are able to do on our own, and the incentive is not necessarily to the general public, but to probably a few individuals. I would like this to be clear. In terms of, again, enforcement, those who have been to Rwanda, you realize that the communication in terms of enforcement comes from the very, very, very top, and everybody complies. Why is it that we have these gaps in our situation? Thank you. I'm from Karen neighborhood, and that is Ongata Rongai.
Asante sana. Thank you very much. I think we have touched on some of those questions you've asked. But Chwanya, maybe you want just take 1 minute and respond.
Yes, thank you, Bernard. Did you say you are a doctor? You know, that is important that you start that way. Thank you. Yes, the need for the Sustainable Waste Management Act arose when there was a drive to, create regulations on extended producer responsibility, and the professionals were asking where it should be anchored, and they found that MCA didn't quite give provision for that. So that was the time we started scratching our backs. So it was deemed necessary to bring an act that, besides dealing with what we call domestic waste, would also be providing anchorage for our EPR regulations. The Waste Management Regulations Act remains, and like I said, it will be handling hazardous waste. And I also say that we will have to define very clearly what we mean when we say hazardous waste. Okay? And what will not, so that we delineate what is covered under this Act and what is covered under MCA and the Waste Management Regulations of 2006, which, by the way, is also going to be reviewed to shed whatever shall have gone to this Sustainable Waste Management Act. We've talked about incentives. Yes, you're saying in the past incentives have benefited a few. That is what we are running away from, so that it benefits all stakeholders in the waste management sector. And it would be important that you give us your insights so that we remove clauses that may limit it to those few individuals. It can only happen that way if we let regulations be done in a closed room without public participation, which in this case there is no room for, because the second schedule outlines matters to do with public participation, not just consultation where you send questionnaires. This is participation. Thank you.
Asante sana. Thank you very much for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want us to come to a close of this. I think we are at 11:37, and I believe that we've done some justice to our time here in terms of engagement and learning something new from the Act. Our attention, our focus now shift as CARA to development of the regulations, and of course establishment of the council, because that is where the real action is going to be. And we expect and hope that as we go down to the counties, because we were told that there's a model law that is going to be used by counties to develop their own. We are going to have similar structure at the county level, where we can also have representation of resident associations in each and every county. And then they can be able to guide conversation about how they're going to manage their waste at the county level. So we'll continue engaging in that regard, of course, working with NEMA, working with the ministry, and all the other stakeholders, so that we have a law that is working for us and is addressing the challenges that we are facing on a day-to-day basis. So I want to thank all of you for your patience and for participating in this session. I just want to make a few announcements, especially for those who might have come in a bit late after we started. As my chairman, Mr. Nyaga, said at the beginning, is that number one, we are planning to have our AGM end of March, about a month and a half from now. And as you all know, the AGM requires that for you to participate and even vote, if we need to vote, you must be a fully paid up member. So if you are not paid up in terms of subscription for this year, please make arrangement to do so. If you are here and you are not an official, please pass the message to your official so that they can be able to make arrangement for membership subscription for this year, and then you'll get an invitation to the AGM. Number two, we also mentioned about the Chairman's Forum, which we are having on Friday this week. This is a session for basically officials of the various associations to come and talk about service delivery issues. And we are going to have conversation with the chairman of the National Environment Complaints Committee, the Environmental Ombudsman, and also the CEC in charge of public participation and customer service at the county government. So we have invited them. We expect that they'll join us. And of course, we'll have much, much more conversation about the activities of CARA and how we want to engage various entities. So if you are yet to confirm your participation, because I know some of you have already confirmed, I saw some confirmations. So if you are yet to confirm your participation, please, we invite you to do that. You can call our office, our number, which I know most of you have, 0725 983 445. 0725 983 445. You can call to confirm your participation or send an email because we want to know who is coming so that we can make adequate preparation. It will be at our offices, Kingara Close, just off Ngong Road behind the Junction Mall. So please join us on Friday. We had said that we are starting at 10, but we will want to request that you can come as early as 9, because before our guests arrive, we want to have some in-house conversation and just discussion about some of the activities and plans we are having. So if you can come slightly earlier, maybe by 9:30, so that we have our own discussion and then we can engage the guests, we'll appreciate. But please confirm your participation, send an email, call, so that we can be able to know that you are coming. If you are not an official, please pass the message to your leadership. And if any of the leadership is not able to make it, because basically what we want is the representation of the association. So if the chairman, secretary, treasurer is not able to come, you can request them, or they can send somebody from the association to represent them. So please make sure that you are represented as an association. Number 3 is that you all recall that we've always had our Excellence Awards at the end of every year. Last year in November, we were not able to have the session for reasons that we wanted to make it a bit bigger than what we normally had and combine it with a summit. So we agreed that we are going to push it to the first quarter of this year. So in April, first week of April, we are going to have our Excellence Awards together with the summit. We plan to make it a 2-day event. We've already sent out communication about how to make entries. And previously, most of you have participated in the award scheme. So again, we invite you that if you have a story that you want to tell, if you want to be part of these Excellence Awards, please make your entry. We already shared the details on email. If you don't have it, please let us know. We'll share it again with you so that you can be able to be part of this award scheme. So please make your entry as soon as possible. I think the deadline is on 10th of March, the deadline for entries. Please make sure you do that, and we'll share more information as we go along. Of course, for those of you in the private sector or other engagement, we have opportunity for partnerships. So if you want to partner, if you want to engage with us, please talk to us and we'll be able to engage you in that regard. Lastly, again, we are reconstituting our committees. We have committees at CARA to look at specific issues and specific areas. We are reconstituting and putting in new blood and just making sure that we reorient it to respond to some of the needs and expectations that we have. And these are voluntary committees. But membership to the committee is voluntary, and it's a way of you using your skills, using your experience and knowledge to support the CARA agenda, and of course the agenda of resident associations. So if you are interested to be a member of any of the committees I'm going to read below, please communicate with us and we'll be able to guide you on how to respond. But basically we just want you to share with us your areas of interest and maybe your skills or qualification that can enable you contribute to any of the committees. So we have the Security Committee, talk about security issues. We have Communication and Relationship Committee. We have the Urban Planning and Development Committee. We have the Governance Committee, and we have the Infrastructure Committee. So those are the and Environment. As Environment Committee. So those are the committees that we are reconstituting. If you have an interest in any of those committees, please let us know, and we'll be able to give that a consideration. So having said that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you once again for your time, for coming and for staying up to this particular point. I want to thank our speakers because they've really done a great job in enlightening us about this law and just showing us what it means and how we can be part of the journey in terms of implementation. So Bwana Kirago, Bwana Chwanya, asanteni sana for sharing with us your thoughts. And of course, we'll share the presentation. Please make sure you leave them with us. We'll share with those who are in this meeting and even those who are not here, so that they can be able to take time and just look at it more keenly. Robertson, as always, thank you very much. Hans Sidel Foundation for the partnership and for the support for the many years that we've worked together. And of course, I must thank our chair, Mr. Kanake, treasurer, charity. I saw Peter Hammond came in a bit late. He's also one of the board members, council members. Asanteni sana. And to you participants, our members, and everybody else who came, thank you very much for really showing interest in learning something new, because every day is a day for learning. So if you are not improving yourself, if you are not learning, then you are actually remaining behind. So your coming here shows that you are willing to learn and get new knowledge. So thank you very much, and please be on the lookout for our next activities. We are going to have a series of activities this year, which we'll share. And please, whenever we invite you to come, please do so, because at the end of the day, the interest is making sure that you are informed so that you can also make informed choices and informed decisions. And that's what our interest is as Kara, and make you responsible citizens. So with those few and many remarks, I want to request Reverend Ephraim Kanake to close for us with a word of prayer. He became a reverend recently, and that's why nowadays he talks about Bible and God all the time, which is a good thing. So Bwana Kanake, please come and close for us. And please, we have some refreshments and bitings. Make sure you grab something before you leave. Asanteni sana, and God bless.
Thank you, Henry, for the privilege. I'm hard-bored completely to close this session. I want to just pray so that we can have time to socialize and engage to get the views on what has been going on, and share the little you have with your friend as you take a cup of tea. I want to thank you also. You came very early. I found most of you, so I am apologizing for coming late. And thank you for being here in time. Let me pray so that we can have a cup of tea, blessed, and our journeys back home. Thank you, Father. We thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk about our nation. We want to thank you that the subject at hand on environment and solid waste management in a sustainable way is a topic of discussion. Close to about 50 years now, we have not had an understanding on how best to do it. We are very close to getting it over, and we want to thank you for giving us an opportunity to engage and agree that God said we must keep our environment clean even after we have used the land. And no waste should be found in the open ground. Our people, Lord, are good people. They are godly, and they believe in living a holy life, clean life that you have asked us to do in Deuteronomy 23:9-16. Thank you for the cup of tea. Bless it as we have it, and socialize, and give us a safe journey back home. For we pray this, believing and trusting in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Go well.